Tarot is often misunderstood because it sits at the intersection of art, history, psychology, spirituality, and popular myth. It has been alternately dismissed as superstition, romanticized as ancient magic, and commercialized as a shortcut to certainty. In reality, tarot is far more complex and intellectually interesting than any of these simplifications suggest. At its core, tarot is a symbolic system designed to organize human experience into recognizable patterns. It does not tell a fixed future, nor does it operate as a belief system that demands faith. Instead, it functions as a structured language of images that allows abstract ideas, inner states, and life situations to be examined with clarity. One of the most persistent myths surrounding tarot is that it originated in ancient Egypt or was secretly preserved by mystical orders for thousands of years. This narrative emerged largely in the 18th and 19th centuries, when European occultists sought to legitimize tarot by attaching it to ancient civilizations. While Egypt did profoundly influence Western esoteric thought, there is no historical evidence that tarot decks existed in antiquity. Tarot, as we know it, is a product of medieval and Renaissance Europe, shaped by the social, religious, and artistic environment of its time. The earliest documented tarot decks appear in northern Italy during the 15th century. These decks were commissioned by wealthy families such as the Visconti and Sforza and were used primarily for a card game known as Triumphi, or Triumphs. The imagery reflected the worldview of late medieval Europe: religious hierarchy, moral allegory, social order, and the inevitability of fate and death. These were not occult tools but cultural artifacts, similar to illuminated manuscripts or allegorical paintings. Their symbolic richness, however, made them particularly suited for later reinterpretation. What makes tarot unusual among card systems is its dual structure. Unlike standard playing cards, tarot includes an additional set of symbolic cards that stand apart from the suits. This division between what later came to be called the major arcana and the minor arcana is one of tarot's defining features. It allows the deck to operate on two levels simultaneously: the universal and the personal, the archetypal and the everyday. This structural design is one reason tarot has endured while many other historical card systems have faded into obscurity. The transformation of tarot from a game into a tool for interpretation occurred gradually. In the 18th century, thinkers such as Antoine Court de Gebelin began to argue that tarot contained hidden philosophical and spiritual knowledge. These interpretations were speculative, but they reframed tarot as a symbolic text rather than mere entertainment. This shift coincided with a broader cultural movement in Europe that sought meaning beyond institutional religion, particularly through symbolism, mysticism, and personal insight. By the 19th century, tarot had been absorbed into formal esoteric systems. Occultists linked tarot to astrology, numerology, Hermetic philosophy, and the Kabbalistic tree of life. Whether or not these associations were historically accurate is less important than their impact. They provided tarot with an internal logic that appealed to analytical minds as much as intuitive ones. Tarot became a structured model of reality, capable of mapping psychological processes, ethical dilemmas, and spiritual development. A crucial reason tarot remains relevant is its reliance on archetypes. Archetypes are not cultural inventions but recurring patterns of human experience: authority, rebellion, loss, hope, transformation, ambition, fear, renewal. Tarot does not invent these ideas, it organizes them visually. This is why tarot imagery can be understood across cultures and time periods, even when specific symbols differ. The human mind is naturally responsive to metaphor and narrative, and tarot speaks fluently in both. In the 20th century, tarot gained renewed legitimacy through psychology rather than mysticism. Carl Jung's work on the collective unconscious and symbolic imagery provided a framework for understanding why tarot feels meaningful even without belief in the supernatural. From this perspective, tarot works because it externalizes internal states. It gives shape to vague thoughts and emotions, allowing them to be examined consciously. This does not require belief in fate, spirits, or prophecy. It requires only self-reflection. Another common misconception is that tarot predicts an unchangeable future. Historically and practically, tarot has always been more concerned with tendencies, influences, and trajectories than fixed outcomes. Traditional tarot reading focuses on probability and context, not inevitability. It examines where energy is moving, what forces are at play, and what choices are available. In this sense, tarot is closer to strategic analysis than fortune-telling. It identifies patterns and risks rather than issuing decrees. Tarot's imagery is deliberately ambiguous. This is not a flaw but a feature. Ambiguity allows symbols to adapt to different situations and individuals. A rigid system would quickly become obsolete, but tarot's openness enables continuous reinterpretation. This flexibility explains why tarot has been successfully adapted into countless artistic styles, cultural settings, and philosophical frameworks without losing its core identity. The suits of tarot are often misunderstood as rigid categories, but they are better understood as lenses through which experience can be examined. They represent broad domains of life rather than isolated themes. Together, they form a balanced model of human functioning: emotional, material, intellectual, and motivational. This balance is intentional. Tarot does not privilege one domain over the others, it emphasizes integration. Equally important is the numerical structure of tarot. Numbers in tarot are not arbitrary. They express progression, development, tension, and resolution. Across the deck, numbers function as abstract principles that give coherence to the imagery. This numerical consistency allows tarot to communicate complexity without relying on text. It is a visual philosophy. Tarot's endurance is also tied to its adaptability. It has survived religious opposition, scientific skepticism, and commercial trivialization because it continuously reinvents itself. Modern tarot decks incorporate themes from mythology, feminism, psychology, ecology, and contemporary social issues. Despite these variations, the underlying structure remains intact. This is a sign of a robust system rather than a fragile tradition. Importantly, tarot does not require belief to function. One can approach tarot as art, as cultural history, as a psychological tool, or as a spiritual practice. Each approach yields different insights, and none invalidates the others. Tarot's power lies in its capacity to hold multiple interpretations without collapsing into meaninglessness. In educational contexts, tarot is increasingly used as a tool for storytelling, creative writing, coaching, and decision analysis. Its cards provide prompts rather than answers. They stimulate reflection rather than replace judgment. This makes tarot particularly suited to modern life, where uncertainty is constant and simplistic answers are rarely sufficient. Ultimately, tarot endures because it addresses a fundamental human need, the need to make sense of experience. It does not simplify life, it organizes complexity. It does not remove responsibility, it highlights choice. Whether used privately or studied academically, tarot remains a living symbolic system, one that continues to evolve while preserving a structure refined over centuries. In the next lessons, the individual cards will be explored in detail. For now, it is enough to understand tarot as a historical artifact, a symbolic language, and a practical framework for reflection, one that has survived not because it predicts the future, but but because it helps people think more clearly about the present.